Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to MIichael Kraft about Desert Reunion. Welcome back, MIichael.
It's good to be back.
And it is, and it's a wonderful cover. I love, we talked about this your last visit. I love your covers on your books. They're just subtle enough to be interesting. And by that, I mean, you know, you don't have a cleaver in someone's head. So
yeah, there's just the little red splotch of blood is meant to depict the mysterious or more sinister aspects of the story. Although this is the third cover that the little red splotch of blood has appeared on, and I don't think any of the victims have actually died that way.
But it gives every reader the ability to know in advance that we have a murder mystery on our hands.
Right.
So
it's trouble in paradise. I mean, all three of the covers convey that, you know, the sort of, idyllic settings that, conjure up various images of Palm Springs and the Palm Springs area, which people like to refer to as paradise. But the trouble in paradise theme runs throughout.
I love it. So give us a little bit of an overview of what Desert Reunion is about.
There's sort of an overall arc, a plot arc to the entire series. This is the third volume now, and Dante and Jazz, the two central characters, have evolved from enemies to frenemies to now friends, and they're working together as private investigators. And the premise of the series is that Dante, who acts as sort of a concierge for higher-end clients at a vacation rental company, comes in contact with a lot of screwed up people. And he knows when he needs to steer, needing vacation rental clients in Jazz's direction to help them with other seedy and sordid matters in their lives. And so there's been that whole progression of the relationship between Dante and Jazz. There's also been a progression of the romantic relationship between Dante and his boyfriend, DeSandro. In the first book, they sort of met and connected. And in the second book, Dante was getting cold feet about commitment to a relationship. And now in the third volume, that's pretty well settled. They're doing fine. And Dante and Alessandro have moved in together. They left their two separate apartments and have acquired a coach house on a larger estate near downtown Palm Springs that's owned by an older gay man who becomes sort of an uncle figure to both of them. And in the background of all this, a dear old friend of Dante's from the former apartment complex where he lived is named Zola Lorinsky. And she's sort of this madcap, older woman who has a long fabled career as an interior decorator. But she's aging now. She's well into her 80s. And her old circle of clients is gone. And so she's sort of on, in reduced circumstances, let's say. But she hits it off with Harold Gibkin, who's the owner of this estate where the coach house is that Dante and Alessandro live. And she undertakes like an enormous, floor-to-ceiling redecorating project for the main house of the estate. And so this is in the background of what's going on. Meanwhile, Harold, the old man uncle figure who owns the estate, has just on a lark subscribed to one of those DNA ancestry search services, and has uncovered a distant arm of the family that lives nearby in Southern California, and they want to come out for a month-long family reunion, which does not set well with Harold at all. This is not what he had in mind. And although he has plenty of room to put them up, he doesn't want them staying there. So Dante to the rescue. Yeah, exactly.
There's only so much you can do with family under one roof.
That's right. As an aside, the house where my husband and I live has 3 bedrooms, but only one of them functions as a bedroom. The other 2 are offices. So there are no overnight stays.
That's very wise man, very wise man.
But because Dante works for a vacation rental service, he's able to come to the rescue and arrange for lodgings in a very nice house for the group that's coming to meet and connect with Harold. From the beginning, when this group arrives, they sense that Harold has another agenda because he's an inventor of sorts, and he wants not Harold. I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up on the names.
That's right. No, you're right. It is Harold. It's Richard that owns the estate.
That's right. Richard owns the estate, and Harold is the second cousin. Harold is something of an inventor and wants to recruit Richard as an investor in this sort of madcap scheme.
And just for the audience, it has that feel of Amway almost. You nailed it on the head, Michael. I mean, it is, because that people who invent things are always excited about their invention, as well they should be. But they oftentimes think everyone else will be just as excited about their invention and want to throw all the money they own in the world at that invention. That's not always the case, especially when you have someone you don't even really know.
Exactly. This is like, relatives come out of the woodwork, and they're eyeing the fortune of the long lost distant second cousin. Because it's a murder mystery, as you might suspect, bad things start to happen. One person in the guest house, in the visiting guest house, is murdered, and then later on in the book, another person meets his or her demise, and at least in the first case, the primary suspect, because of circumstances beyond her control, turned out to be Zola Lorinsky, the interior decorator, the very old dear friend of Dante, and so that's his impetus to kind of get involved with proving what the police apparently cannot, and that is that Zola didn't do it. So that's the basic problem that the plot tries to solve.
I love it. It's such an interesting read. You capture, when I read your books, you capture the theatricality of Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Anyone who goes to Palm Springs, I always tell people the reason Palm Springs is happy is because people go there because they want to. They're not trying to escape there. There's so many cities in this country where people want to get out of, but Palm Springs is a place people want to go to. So you go there with an expectation of having a good time. And I go out often and I love it there, but there's a theatricality about the people that live there. They are most of them are a little larger than life.
Yes.
It's not, you won't see it in Iowa the same way for sure. So,
and for people who aren't well acquainted with Palm Springs, it's also very much a gay mecca. There was a large influx of gay men from San Francisco in the last 20 years. And it's usually estimated that Palm Springs proper is at least 50% gay. And so, I mean, that has a bit of sense of pizzazz to it in itself. And it melds very well with the whole postmodernist vibe of the architecture and the culture and the aesthetics. It is a unique place. And
it really is. And then you have Zola, who is aging, but she understands that she has a role to play in that. So that's another compliment I want to give you. You know, you deal with various ages in all of your novels.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, from a reader's standpoint, the fact that you're respectful of everyone's age, no matter whether they're in their 30s or their 80s. Because I see in a lot of writing, there's a bit of ageism. And
Yes.
I'm not sure all authors intend it to happen, but it does happen. You go way out of your way to be inclusive of all ages. Is
Well,
that
what
something you
happened?
set out to do?
Well, I don't know that I consciously set out to do that. I don't think I set out to do that 30 years ago when I first started publishing. But we're all getting older, and at least as I've gotten older, I've become more respectful of the older generation, and I can certainly write what I know when it comes to that. And obviously, the younger generations are, we've all been there, and even though people in their 20s today probably know nothing of the world that we knew in our 20s, it's easy, relatively easy, to depict a generation that you've already visited.
Well, and I agree with that. And I think more than anything else, I think my comment was about the fact that as we grow older, I do see in some people, they want to make fun of the younger generation.
Oh,
And just to your point, we've all been there. How can you dismiss someone in their 20s? I'm 61. I can't dismiss somebody in their 20s. I was 20 one time. So, I
sure.
mean, that's why I think the inclusion of what I see in your writing is so important, because you give us a wide range of ages, and yet you have treated each of those ages with respect. And I
Yeah.
do appreciate that.
And I would say it was indeed a conscious decision to kind of broaden that spectrum even further by having a 5-year-old as not a central character to the plot, but little Emma is a very endearing character who appears in all 3 of the books. And I've never been a father, but I don't know. I just have a sense of how to write that little girl.
You do indeed, and I love that. So how long, where did the idea of Dante and Jazz come from? Besides your creativity, I understand that, but was there a particular thing that got you thinking about this partnership?
Yes. Before this series, which is now 3 years old, I had been invited to contribute a short story to an anthology titled Palm Springs Noir from Akashic Books. They do this series of city noir anthologies, like Los Angeles Noir, Chicago Noir, Boston Noir, etc. And I got approached by the editor who was compiling a list of 14 authors to contribute to Palm Springs Noir. And I sort of jumped at the chance because I've never really written in the noir vein, though I've written a lot of mystery. They've mostly been cozies. And I thought this would be a good chance to try out something totally different, new set of characters, new setting, and in a different tone. The story that evolved was titled VIP Check-In, and it involved Dante and Jazz. I wanted them to be as different as I could make them. Dante is 50 years old and male and gay and white, and Jazz is black and in her 30s and straight. And their first meeting is terrible. I mean, she arrests him as a murder suspect. But things start to get a little better from that point forward. And so, I mean, that story, which was invented, that short story that was invented totally out of, whole new cloth, I thought had a lot of promise. I liked the premise, and I especially liked those 2 characters and the chemistry of those 2 characters. And so I just got busy turning that short story into a full-length novel, and that was the first one, Desert Getaway. And in fact, the short story is essentially chapter 1 of that novel. So that's where it came from. That's how it started. But
I
I mean,
love
it was the need. It was the need to crank out a short story that eventually inspired the whole series.
I love that. I love that. So I am curious, have you ever done a DNA testing?
I did. When I had the idea to do this book, I knew that I wanted to bring in like long lost relatives coming out of the woodwork, and I thought, well, the way to do that would be, to discover people through DNA testing. And I mean, I've known people who've done it, but I've never done it. And just to write about the mechanics of it, sending in the spit sample and all that, I did. I subscribed to one of those services and got the report back. And I mean, the most interesting thing about it was that there were no surprises. I think when most people subscribe to a service like that, they're hoping that they're a descendant of Louis the 14th or something like that. But no, it contained no surprises at all.
Yeah, I will say that obviously we all have two sides of the family. One side of my family is really quite wonderful and loving and kind, and the other side is certifiably crazy. And the reason I didn't watch Jerry Springer is I assumed I'd see family members. So I've often thought that I would never do that for fear of what might crawl out from under a rock.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. After I got my initial report back, you can go online and you can try to find a family tree and all that. And interestingly enough, I did find my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, by name, just on the basis of having sent in a saliva sample. I mean, that's pretty amazing, And so I wrote an email to my brother who lives in the Midwest, and where we both grew up, and we don't see each other often. But I said, you're going to find this interesting, And so I sent him the report that I received. But I told him right off the bat, no surprises.
Well, and I think it does take a bit of bravery as well. So
yeah.
Just in case there are surprises. So will there be a fourth installment?
That is still to be determined.
Okay.
I have been spending my time recently writing a novel in a different vein entirely, and I'm really not prepared to say much about that yet. It is not a fourth installment of Dante and Jazz, but that does not preclude a fourth installment of Dante and Jazz.
Well, I certainly hope there is, because I do enjoy these very much. Again, the book is Desert Reunion. It's by MIichael Kraft. It is out and available now wherever you get your books. Thank you so much for joining me, Mike.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dan. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you. Hang on for me just a second.
Okay.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outWithDan.com, on Twitter at outWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.